My message to other communities of color, you've heard of post-traumatic stress disorder, right? This is an individual diagnosis. PTSD is something that afflicts someone who's experienced, who's witnessed, who's been on the receiving end of violence. They get diagnosed with PTSD. There's another trauma known as historical trauma. Historical trauma is not an individual diagnosis as much as it's a understanding of the broader dissatisfaction in a community. You don't necessarily diagnose one person with historical trauma. It's how you understand the broader dissatisfaction. I like to refer to it as a multi-generational communal manifestation of PTSD. Now, there's another trauma out there called PITS, perpetration-induced traumatic stress. This is like PTSD in every way, shape, and form, except instead of afflicting the person who received the violence, PITS afflicts the person who caused or perpetrated the violence. It's based on this quote by Socrates that says, "The doer of injustice is more miserable than the sufferer." So what I tell people is if there is a multi-generational communal manifestation of PTSD that we call historical trauma, I'm hypothesizing there is a multi-generational communal manifestation of PITS, which is what I'm identifying is the trauma that is afflicting white America, because you cannot build a nation on 500 years of dehumanizing injustice without traumatizing yourself. So I identify white America as another group of traumatized people. One of the first symptoms of trauma is shock and denial. When you understand white America as another group of traumatized people, it's easy to see their symptoms. This buried apology by our Congress, that's not racism, that's trauma. They're so overwhelmed by what they did, they can't even talk about it. We have Texas and Oklahoma passing laws saying you can only teach patriotic history. That's not racism, that's trauma. They're so overwhelmed by what they did to become who they are, they can't even teach it anymore. We have the civil rights movement using the Declaration as a moral authority. That's deflection, that's trauma. American exceptionalism is merely the coping mechanism of a nation in deep denial of its genocidal past and its current racist reality. When you deal with trauma patients, you also deal with what are called triggers. Triggers is something that takes you out of reality, a sight, a sound, a smell, something takes you out of reality and into the chaos of the moment when the traumatic event happened. When you understand white America as a traumatized people group, it's easy to see their triggers. 7 years of a black president is a trigger. Without President Obama, Donald Trump never rises. Any sort of national dialogue on gun control is a trigger. We can't have that conversation without screaming at each other. I identify ISIS as a trigger. Why is ISIS a trigger? Well, they're a group of religious zealots ethnically cleansing a land to set up their own pseudo-religious empire. That reflection is so awfully familiar, white America doesn't know what to do with it. That's why Paris gets bombed and somehow it's all about them. It's all about us. We don't know what to do. So I'm not trying to convince white America they're traumatized. I'm trying to convince people of color that white America is traumatized. Why? Because we know our communities are jacked up. I know my reservation's a mess. We know that we're traumatized. We know, we're aware of what's going on. Not that we're healed, but we're aware that we're in a mess. The problem is we have this belief that white America came out of that same history unscathed. And so because of that, we tend to look at white America like they can fix it. The problem is white America can't fix it. White America does not have the tools in their tool belt to fix the problem. What does white America bring to the table? Well, first they bring their money, which is all blood money. Second, they bring their understanding of liberty and justice and freedom. which their own documents define are for a very narrowly select few. They can't fix it. I have a daughter, she's 7 years old. She could pull the parking brake on my car, let it roll down the hill, and crash into a tree. She could wreck my car. She hasn't, but she could. I could scream at her all I want. She can't fix it. Screaming at her only frustrates me and paralyzes her. When we scream at white America, people of color, to fix it, we frustrate ourselves, we paralyze them. We need to understand we are dealing with another group of traumatized people. And so when they go into shock and denial, when white America begins to manifest some of their triggers, just like when you're with a counselor, if you've ever been to a counselor and you start getting onto a hot topic and you begin emotionally boiling, rarely does your counselor get into there and mix it up with you, right? Why? Your counselor understands this is good. We're making a connection. You need the space to express yourself, but I'm not going to let you take things over. I'm not going to let you run it. You're traumatized. White America, we need to treat them as another group of traumatized people. In most racial dialogues, white America is either racist or they're fragile. I don't think either one of those are helpful places to start the conversation. If white America is merely racist, there's no place for them in this conversation. If white America is fragile, it means we have to walk around on eggshells around them. By understanding white America is traumatized, not victimized, traumatized by their own history, by what they're standing on, we can understand that it's actually good when they begin to have these reactions because something's being touched. It is good when something gets touched and you begin to make a connection. You have to find a way to build on that, not let it take over the entire situation.